Literature also remains an important issue in research. And for that reason, we also want to take time to understand what is meant by literature. We are going to have a 3-lecture series on literature. The first part, we will understand what is meant by literature, the types, and the sources of various literature. The second part, we shall look at the process of literature review and why it is important for researchers to undertake literature review. The third and last part of the lecture series on literature, we shall look at citations. That is, how do researchers cite the various sources of literature that they use in their work. We shall look at both in-text as well as end-of-text citations. So that one will come at the end in our 3-lecture series on literature review. Otherwise, for now, the current discussion will focus on 3 areas. One, the meaning of literature as it is understood in social science research. The second one, we shall look at the types of literature, and then we shall conclude the discussion with a focus on the sources of literature. Welcome you. Well, I want to welcome you all to this discussion. The term literature refers to a collection of published information or material on a particular area of research or topic, such as books and journal articles that are of academic value. But the term literature may also refer to a collection of recorded work, which may be written, audio recorded, or video recorded that may enhance our understanding in any area of knowledge. And such literature include fictional and non-fictional materials, such as books, articles, or other encrypted information, as well as audio and video recorded information on a particular subject or field. In short, when we talk about literature, we are simply referring to any information which, upon reading, can help us understand what has been done in a given area of research or a given area of interest. As we are going to see later on, literature is important in terms of informing us about the various things, including what has been done, so that we're in a position not to repeat studies on issues that have been done by previous researchers, but to look at aspects of past studies and where previous studies have not touched, so that we refocus our studies to look into those areas that very little, if any, is known about, so that we can undertake study to expand our knowledge about those areas. Literature can be grouped into different types. So I want us to look at some of the types of literature that may be available to researchers. One of them is called primary literature. And primary literature refers to the original studies which are based on administration of questionnaires, interviews, direct observation, as well as use of statistical records of actual practices. Primary literature displays original thinking, report on new discoveries, or share fresh information which are authored by researchers and contains original research data. The sources usually are published in a peer-reviewed journal, but may also include conference papers, preprints, or preliminary reports. Some of the examples of primary literature include theses or dissertations, scholarly journal articles, some government reports, symposia and conference proceedings, original artwork, poems, photographs, speeches, letters, memos, personal narratives, diaries, interviews, autobiographies, as well as correspondences. So all these are examples of primary literature. In short, when you talk about primary literature, it is literature that is obtained from the original sources, and they are developed through direct administration of questionnaires, interviews, direct observation, and other research instruments. The other type of literature is called secondary literature. And secondary literature consists of interpretations and evaluations which are derived from primary literature. These sources of literature or secondary literature offers an analysis or restatement of primary sources, often describing or explaining primary sources in form of summaries, interpretations, as well as syntheses. They are mainly produced by professionals and scholars who review and synthesize primary literature to establish trends and direction in any given discipline. They include textbooks, edited works, books and articles that interpret or review research works, histories, biographies, literary criticisms and interpretations, reviews of law and legislations, political analysis, as well as commentaries. In other words, primary sources, rather secondary sources, or rather secondary literature are largely derived from primary sources, and they are products of analysis or synthesis of primary literature. Based on this, we can therefore say that secondary sources cannot stand on its own, and they cannot be developed without the primary literature, because their main source is the primary literature. The other type of literature is called tertiary literature. And tertiary literature consists of a distillation and collection of primary and secondary sources, namely textbooks, encyclopedia, articles, guidebooks, or handbooks. Tertiary literature provides an overview of key research findings and an introduction to principles and practices within a given discipline. Some reference materials and textbooks are considered tertiary sources when their chief purpose is to list, summarize, or simply repackage ideas or other information. Tertiary literature is usually not credited to a particular author and include dictionaries, encyclopedia, fact books, guidebooks, manuals, handbooks, and textbooks, indices, as well as abstracts. In other words, when you talk of tertiary literature, they are literature that are meant to provide summaries and expand knowledge in a broader area. For instance, dictionaries, encyclopedias, others, including holy books. Those are part of tertiary literature. They are also important when it comes to research, and that's why they are heavily considered as literature. The other type of literature is called grey literature. And grey literature refers to the material that is either unpublished or published in non-commercial form, such as theses, dissertations, government reports, fact sheets, and even preprints of articles. Grey literature is normally not evaluated and peer-reviewed, and they include preprints, preliminary progress and advanced reports, institutional, internal, technical, and statistical reports, market research reports, reports of commissions, and even study groups. Other forms of the grade literature are conference proceedings, technical specifications and standards, technical and commercial documentation. Grade literature, which should be used sparingly in academic and scholarly studies, is particularly useful for exploring emerging topics and trends. Let us now discuss some of the sources of literature. One of the most commonly used source of literature is the books, and these are textbooks, and they remain one of the most important sources of literature, which should be considered as an integral part of the research. Researchers should focus on the most respected authorities in their research areas while selecting books for literature review. Some books are written for a popular audience in mind, while others might be a target of a technical or occupational audience, but others might be focused on an academic or scholarly audience. Therefore, it is important for us to carefully have a preliminary view of the kind of textbooks that we want to use, just to ensure that we are picking the right books that are authored by respected and reputable authors. Some of the issues to be considered when selecting books include authorship. We need to carefully look at who is the author, what is their area of specialization, how long have they been authoring the books, and are there other books that they have authored? That becomes important. Again, the content. We also have to look at what kind of information is contained in a given textbook that we intend to use. We also need to look at the timeliness, so that some information are better understood when we look at the latest publications, because continuous research might invalidate earlier findings that have been documented in books. It is therefore important that we look at the most latest information, which is contained in the latest published books. Then we also have to look at the publisher. The company that publishes the material also becomes important, because some publishers are reputable, others are not. So we need to go for publishers that have a reputation, that have experience, and that have a history of publishing important and intellectually challenging materials. The main advantage of textbook as a source of material is that published books is usually important and of good quality, and the findings are normally integrated with other research to form a coherent body of knowledge, so that one single textbook can be a summary of various researches, so that by reading a book, a person is able to have at a glance several studies that have been taken, the findings that have been found, whether they are coherent with each other or whether they're contradictory, and possibly the explanations that are leading to such contradictions. So books remain an important source of literature. Journal is just another source of literature that is often used by researchers. And a journal is simply a collection of articles which is published regularly throughout the year. Journals present the most recent research, and journal articles are normally written by experts for experts and are shorter than books and written about very specific topics or issues. For a journal to be accepted, and published in an academic journal, a scholarly article has to pass an academic quality assessment through review by scholars in the same field, or what we call the peer review. And this supervisory method is referred to as peer review and is normally designed to maintain the academic standard of the particular of a given article. Scholarly articles remain one of the key ways of communicating new knowledge and discovering discoveries to a science or a scholarly group. So journals are normally preferred because in journals you can find the latest research findings compared to books, which normally take a while. Some journals publish articles monthly, others quarterly, others yearly. So it is possible that through journals, researchers can get up to date or the latest information in any given field, which can be useful in terms of understanding the trends and emerging issues in a given field of study. The other source of literature are the theses and dissertations. And these are basically documents that are submitted by students who are pursuing advanced studies or higher studies. In some cases, it is at degree level and undergraduate level. In some cases, it is master's as well as the PhDs. It should be noted that most graduate studies and even advanced diploma require the completion of a thesis or dissertation for graduation. And a recently completed thesis or dissertation can provide researchers with valuable information on research findings in areas that have yet to reach the public via other formats or other forms of publication. They provide insight into the early work of a particular person and have value for historical as well as biographical information. So theses and dissertations are quite important, and researchers often consider them as important sources of literature. There are also other sources of literature which here we want to group as others. They include abstracts, indices, conference papers, and even conference proceedings. Government publications such as reports on various sectors, census reports are also considered as sources of literature. Legislative proceedings such as laws that have been passed by Parliament, discussions that go on in Parliament that are recorded in Hansards, or proceedings of Parliament in parliamentary committees which have been documented also constitute sources of literature. Other important sources of literature are judicial proceedings, that is, cases that are going on in court, those that have been adjudicated over, or those that are still ongoing, can also constitute an important source of literature depending on the area of a researcher's interest. Professional manuals, such as those for engineers, for doctors, and for various fields, those manuals or guidebooks or guidelines that professionals are required to observe and follow, they also constitute important sources of literature. Magazines, newspapers, periodicals, among others, are also constitute literature, and as such are considered important sources of literature. Recorded radio shows or discussions that go on in the radio which have been recorded can also be used as important sources of literature. The same would apply to interviews that are conducted on TVs and other media platforms. All those constitute sources of literature, and from time to time, they may be considered or admitted as sources of literature that are available to researchers. Students are free to explore more on the source of literature over and above the ones that we have discussed here. Otherwise, I want again indicate to students that you are free to note down any issue that you feel we need to put our heads together and discuss more for a better understanding. Thank you.